So today we're going to be working with arrays again, and essentially what we're going to do is highlight it in a text document that I have. And the text document essentially just says that we're going to have a program which is going to store an amount of money for each and every day of the week for a supermarket. And we're going to give the user a couple choices so that they can actually compute the average of their monetary amount, or they could find the highest or lowest amount that they have throughout their sales. Or of course, they can print out all that information in one go. So we're essentially going to be utilizing modularization or using structural programming. So we're not going to actually have, we're not going to be utilizing objects in this case. So the idea of modularization is essentially to segment off your program so that it's essentially fragmented into little sections which pertain to a particular activity or function, and those functions will ultimately come together in the main method. So we have a class called market here, and this is of course our main method. So that's where our code will go. And we're going to have a do while loop. Actually, before that, we're actually going to give the user an option. So let's actually call the scanner here because we're going to be using a scanner to get input from the user. And you'll see that this is actually giving me an error because I actually have to import the scanner. Once I do that, we can then, of course, prompt the user for an option. Enter option. And this option is essentially going to be an integer called option. And I'll tell you shortly what this option is on. So this option, we're going to have a do while loop, and it's going to keep executing while option, let's say, does not equal to 0. Now that number is going to change, but I'm putting it to 0 for now. So we're going to keep asking them for a choice. We're going to declare option so that it's valid for our scope, and we're going to initialize it inside the do while. And so we're declaring it outside the do while and initializing it inside the do while. So there really isn't a scope issue here. And so we're going to ask for an option. Or actually what we could do is we could just say press 1 to essentially, so we're going to press 1 to store the amount for each day of the week. Update sales for each day of the week. Okay, and our second option is going to be press 2 to find the sales average. Press 3 to find the highest earning. Press 4 to find the lowest earning. And we'll just do press 5 to display this week's information. And we'll do press 6 to exit. So this is going to essentially keep executing until option does not equal 6. So essentially, if their option equals to 1, we're going to update sales for each day of the week. So this is where the programming starts. So essentially, what we want to recognize is that we're working with, what we want to do is, so we have our main method here, and we're going to have other static methods. One method is essentially going to take an array and populate the array with sales, with an amount of sales. This array is length 7. Okay. Because we know that a week actually has 7 days in it. So we only want, essentially, we only want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We only want 7 boxes. And inside these boxes, the user can actually enter in how much sales, the numerical monetary amount of the sales that they had for each day. Okay, that's what we want. And also recall that each box has an index. So if the length is equal to 7, then the indexes in total are equal to the length minus 1, which means there are actually 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 index places. Just a thought here moving forward. So we're going to create a method called, it's going to be static, it's going to be called populate. It's going to essentially return an array of doubles. And we're using doubles because we can enter an amount for sales and or we can enter in a particular monetary amount, and that could be like $33.05 or whatever. So that just makes it, it really fits the idea of working with decimals. So we're going to say static double populate array. And essentially what this is going to do is it's going to take in an array. It's going to take in some array. And when it does take in some array, we want to populate the array. So in order to do that, we're going to actually iterate through the empty elements of the array and actually reference each index and fill the element with something. So the length is 7, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we recognize that we actually have these indexes, right? And actually this is completely wrong because it actually starts from 0, right? So instead of it being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. So we're going to essentially, int I is going to keep track of the indexes, and it's going to keep incrementing so long as the index is less than the length of the array. Because that's what we want. Recognize that the length is 7 and the index is 6. So the index always has to be less than sort of less than the length of the array, not equal to. So this sort of ensures that we actually count upwards from 0. And as we move through this array and it counts up from 0, it will let us access a new box and place something inside it. So what we're going to do is we're going to populate it with values. So first we're going to ask them what they'd like to populate a particular box with. Right now we're on the 0th index, which means we're talking about the first element. So we're going to say enter in amount, or enter in sales amount or enter sale amount, enter income for day 1. Enter income for day is all we're going to say. We could put I here, and that would make sense because I would keep incrementing. And as it does that, it will ask us for the income for day 0, then day 1, then day 2. But we actually don't want to start from day 0. I mean, we're going to start from day 0 because it's the 0th iteration. But we don't want to start this print statement from day 0. We actually want to start it from 0 plus 1. So it's instead of doing enter income for day 0, then enter income for day 1, it's actually going to enter income for day 1 and then income for day 2, so on and so forth, so long as I is less than SumArray.length, which we know SumArray.length is just going to evaluate to 7 because the length of the array is essentially the number of boxes which are formed, and that would be 7 in magnitude, because we're talking about a week, and a week only has 7 days. So now we're going to, so we've asked them to enter the income for day one, and we're actually going to allow them to do that. So we could say income equals data dot next double. And so now essentially what we've done is we've asked them to enter the income for day one, and it'll keep doing that and keep taking input from the user, but it's not doing anything per se. What we want it to do each iteration is reference the index, which it's first going to be 0, and then it's going to build up its way to 1, 2, 3, 4, and then change all the elements as it traverses through the entire array. But it does array I, and then it equals to whatever they entered in. So for the first iteration, sum array, this would be, for the first iteration, it's going to be 0. So at the 0th index, it references the first element, and whatever they enter here is going to be stored in that element. And then so we're going to essentially just reference the array index at any particular index and store income, which is of course what they enter into that particular element which the index refers to. Now, of course, you recognize that we have an array on data. Scanner data equals new scanner dot in. So after the array is done traversing through these empty boxes and filling them up with whatever the user entered, we're just going to return that array. Now, this array is essentially going to be, I mean, you could essentially enter any array you want, and it would perform this action on it. And so this array is essentially going to be an array which represents the sales across 7 days. So if we, so let's just actually assume that we have an array here. It's going to be double. Let's call it sales array equals new double. Okay, and it's going to be a length of 7. So we know how long it is. It's 7, and so we're going to essentially, when we call on populate array here, we're just going to store sales array in the parameters of populate array. And I'm going to show you that now. So first, I can obviously populate the array, but I'm also going to just do something here. Static void print. This will take in an array. It's also going to take in just some random array. It could be any array, but it's going to be the array I want. And then what it's going to do is it's going to use a for loop to actually iterate through and it will just print out the index, the element at a particular index. So here what I want to show you is that I can use the populate array on sales array. Okay, that would work. And then I want to show you that I can actually print out what I entered in populate array. So here I'm just going to load in sales array. And I want to show you that this works. So I press 1, and it says enter income for day 1. Let's say 40, 30, and then I just enter these values, and it's going to essentially print out. So it's not printing out the values, unfortunately. Instead, what it's doing is it's just printing out I. And since I keeps incrementing from 0 all the way to some array.length, which in this case I've loaded the array with length 7, essentially it's essentially just printing out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 until 6, because this is 7 indexes inclusive of 0. So we actually have to refer to the array here, And then and only then would this work, what I've been trying to do here. I'm entering random values. So you can see that I entered these values in and it just sort of relayed them back to me, printed them back to me, 22, 2, 3, 54, 2, and 3, 22, 2, 3, 54, 2, and 3. So it works, right? So this works. So that's the idea. But of course, we don't want to print anything out. We just want to populate the array in this case. And we're going to essentially, yeah, so we've populated the array. Now, if the option is essentially equal to 2, we want to find the sales average. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is just printing out values, right? And this is going to be the sales average. So this is going to be static. We're going to return a double. It's going to be an average. And it's going to be called average. I'm going to enter in an array here. Okay, some random array. And what we'll do is, so we know that, an average is essentially just the sum of all sales divided by the number of sales. And you can think of this as the sum of all entries per day divided by the number of entries. Okay. And in order to do that, we'll actually need the sum. So it would be best if we made a sort of a method which calculates the sum. So this method is going to be a static double sum method, which is going to essentially take in, it's going to take in an array and calculate the sum of everything that's inside that array. So we want to add each element to itself. So we're going to first, of course, iterate through. And as we iterate through, we're going to have this variable called sum. And sum will essentially equal the, it will equal the array, it'll equal the first element, whatever they enter, which is referenced by the index, which in this case, I stands for that particular index. And so the sum right now, if they enter in one value, or if we actually, as of now, we're just grabbing, on the first iteration, we're grabbing the first index, which references the first element. And that would be the sum, because there's really no other element here. So the sum is actually equal to the first element, which let's say it's 23, or let's say 20, right? Now for the next one, and this is of course iteration 0, where 0 is referencing the first element, which is 20. For the next iteration, essentially, let's say if the element was 30, we want to essentially add 30 to the last value, to the value that we had in the previous iteration, which is 20. And since we know sum stores 20, then we could just say, that 30 plus sum will essentially just be equal to 30 plus 20, which is 50. So we could say that our new sum is equal to sum plus 30, right? So that's probably confusing, but just remember that if we want to compound on top of the previous value, then its sum is equal to sum plus that value. So that's how we calculate the sum, and then we'll just return the sum there. So this is giving us the sum, and now that we have the sum, in order to calculate the average, not only do we have to have an array, but we also have to have the sum, right? So then we can actually have a double called average. An average will essentially be equal to, let's see, so it will be equal to the sum divided by the length of the array, because the length of the array essentially resembles how many entries we have. We have 7 days, so we have 7 entries. And so that would be our sum, or that would be our average. And then we'll just return the average in this case. So if they were to enter 2, option 2, we'll just tell them that the sales income average, right? Or yeah, or sales average, really. And we're not going to put an average. We're going to have to put in, or actually what we should do is we'll just go ahead and store, let's just say that we're going to have average, double average equal to sales average, right? And it's essentially going to be equal to the average method, which loads in sales array, because that's the array that we're currently concerned about. And it's not letting me do this because this method takes in the array, but it also takes in the sum. So not only do we want to put the array here, but we also want to put the sum of the array. So we're also going to have sum, which is equal to sum, and then we load the sum method, and then we sort of load the array in here. Sales array and then sum. So this should probably be working, but it's not, because let's see why. Well, double sum array, double sum. Let's see. Probably should actually just remove these. That's not proper syntax here. That's only when we're declaring an array. And so for here, it says the method average double double. Let's see. So let's go back to our average method here, and let's see what the problem could be, right? So yeah, we're taking in the sum and we're taking in a double when we call the average. And we return the average. So this should be fine. Swap sales array and sum. Okay, I guess that was the problem. We actually have to follow the order there. And so then we can just say that the system.out.println line, we can say that the average sales average is average. Okay. And we'll also put a $sign here. Okay, sounds good. Find the sales average. So now if the option that they want to enter is equal to 3, then in that case, we're going to just print out, so there's going to be a double which stores the highest value. Then highest value is going to equal to the highest value method, and this method will essentially take in an array. In this case, it would be sales array. And when it takes in that array, it'll spit back the highest value. Then we'll go ahead and print out that the highest income or highest sale, right, is highest value dollars. So we actually have to make a highest value method, which takes in the sales array and spits back the highest value. So in this case, we're going to highest value array or highest value method. This is going to be static. It's going to spit back a double. It's going to be the highest value of all entries. It's going to be called highest value. It's going to take in an array, which in this case would be sales array. And we're going to traverse through the entire array to actually get the highest value. So first and foremost, what we're going to do is we're going to actually declare the highest value to be the first element at the 0th index. So that would be sum array at 0, sub 0. And then we're going to say, look, if the highest value, or if a particular element at a particular index in the sum array is greater than the highest value that we concede, which is, we're assuming the first is the highest value, then and only then, in that case, would you essentially assign or really give the rank of highest value to that particular index, right? Otherwise, things just won't change. The highest value will just be what the last value was. Awesome. Okay, so then we're just going to, after the for loop ends, we'll just return the highest value. So if any particular element at a particular index is greater than the highest value, which would of course just be the previous value, then set highest value to that array, otherwise do nothing and keep highest value the same. And that would be the highest value. And so now we can just, this works, right? What we have up here works. Else if the option is equal to 4, I guess they want to find the highest value or the lowest value. So we'll just do everything we did here, but instead of saying highest, we're just going to say lowest. So we're actually going to have to create a method which essentially takes the lowest value, or really returns the lowest value of any given array we enter. Okay, and it's giving me a red underline because I actually don't have a method which takes in the lowest value. Static double, I'm going to call it lowest value. It's going to take in an array. We're going to call this sum array, and we're going to traverse through. I should be less than the sum array dot length, increment I by 1 each time, and essentially we're going to declare. We're actually going to start this count at 1 because it doesn't make sense to compare the first to the first. Doesn't make sense to compare the first index, which is 0, the 0th index to the 0th index. We're going to start our count at 1. I'll explain this on Python tutor shortly after we get the program up and running. I'll make a note up here to actually do that. Explain on Python tutor how to find highest value. But essentially, we want to change this to 1. Okay, and I'll tell you why later. But so we're going to declare a double called the lowest value, and that will essentially equal to the array's first element. And as it traverses through, if any given element in the array is essentially less than the lowest value that we had conceived, then and only then will you assign that array or that index or that element at that index to the lowest value. Otherwise, just leave things unchanged. It won't really do anything. Then after the loop ends, we'll just return Just return the lowest value. Okay. And again, we want to start this at 1. So this one will essentially just say that the lowest sale is this. Now, else if they press 5, so if their option is actually equal to 5, what we want to do in this case is we want to just give them a weekly information. And we're going to start by giving them the sales they made for each day of the week. So we're essentially kind of just printing out the values, right? We could just call this, what we could do here is we could say sales for the week, or sales. Actually, what I'll do here is weekly information. So the sales will essentially just call on the print, and it's going to take in an array, which is the sales array, and it'll print each day what we got. So let's see how that works. Want to update sales for each day of the week. So if I say 20, 20, if I just keep entering these trivial values here, and we say, okay, 5 to display this week's information, it just prints out those values, but it's not really saying, oh, this is what you made on day 1, this is what you made on day 2. So in order to do that, let's just actually go to the print method here and say, okay, income on day, right? We're just going to say income on day. And the idea is to say income on day 1, income on day 2, and we'll just concatenate the I plus 1 to actually have that working. And we'll say income on day 1, income on day 2, income on day 3. And we'll say income on day 1 is I plus 1, obviously. But it's going to merge them together. So let's just put this here. And we'll also put a space between the monetary amount. But actually, we would want to put a colon between that, just like that. And then we'll also put a $sign here. Let's see how that works for us. Income on day 1, income on day 2. So we're going to say 5 to display this week's information, which it does. Awesome, this is exactly what we wanted. And I'm going to essentially, let's see here. Now I'm going to call the print method here. So I've already done that. And then after I sort of print out the sales, I'm going to print out another line to get some spacing. And I'm going to then print out the highest, the lowest, and the average. So I'm going to say average income. I want to put down the average. And I can't do that. I can't put down the average. Now, I actually have a variable called the average, but it only exists within these braces here. So if I actually just copy this, and if I don't declare it and initialize it in the same scope, then it should work. I'll declare it outside the do while. And now, so it's declared, and now it's talking about this average and initializes it inside these blocks here, or these braces. And so when I refer to it anywhere else, since it's now a class, a global variable, it now is able to actually assume that value when the program runs. course, it doesn't know eventually it's going to be initialized, right? So we're just going to say it's 0 for now. So now it just refers to the same average income. And the same thing sort of applies to the highest, or let's put another print line before we get into anything else here. We're saying highest earning is highest earning, right? And the lowest earning is the lowest earning. And we're actually going to concatenate this with a $sign. Same thing for highest earning. And of course, this is giving me the same error that for the same reason. It's giving me an error for the same reason that I had an error for average. And that's essentially because again, I've declared it and initialized it only in only between these two braces. So it only exists here. But if I declare it outside and initialize it inside, it becomes valid. And the reason is because when I declare it on the outside, it becomes a global variable. So it's accessible to every block of code. And so by that frame of logic, so it's not highest earning, it's highest value, unfortunately. But by that frame of rationale, it no longer gives me an error. It gives me an error for lowest value because, of course, I haven't done the same thing for lowest value yet. But if I do, you can see that no longer gives me an error. Average income, highest earning, lowest earning, the sales, and I think that's actually about it, right? So there's also 6 to display or 6 to exit the program, right? So if we had else if option is equal to 6, then we just exit the program, in which case we'll just say, thank you for using our program, and we'll make that red. So let's see if this works. So it does say we have an error, and that error is because we're missing a brace somewhere, or missing a semicolon, not a brace. But if we go through this here, you'll see that so these actually need to be initialized to default value. Java doesn't know that they will eventually become initialized. So it's good practice to just set them to some default values beforehand. Let's actually put this entire thing in some sort of a box, right? I'll show you what I mean. So now it's essentially going to print out this box here. So this will look a little more neater. I wonder if I can make those lines red. I think they're going to merge together though. It says press 1 to update the sales. I can enter the income for day 1. Let's say 20, day 2, 20, 20, 20, or just keep doing that. So it gives you the sale average here. 1. Okay, so let me just do this again. So if I have $5 per day, I know that my highest earning, of course, should be 5, and my lowest earning is 5 as well. But is there a option to see the total earning? I guess I should do that as well, right? Um, so let's see if I actually have something that calculates the sum. So I guess I'll just calculate the sum in any one of these. Just say that the sum is, it's going to load an array, right? Which is going to be sales array. That should work. Or actually, I actually have a variable that already does that for me, right? Now, if I just reference sum here, it should work. And I'll just add dollar here. So if I do $5 for each day, then I should have a sum total of $35. 7 times 5 is 35. And so if I essentially just press 5, it says that so it's giving me this. It's not giving me total earnings. It's not giving me the lowest earnings. It's not giving me the highest earnings. It's not giving me the average. Why isn't it doing that? I have no idea. However, I'll try to figure out. So maybe because I haven't selected them yet, right? I haven't. So if I have 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, and then if I were to find the sales average by clicking 2, then sales average now exists. So when I display program information, it gives me the average income. And the same thing is for highest and lowest earnings. It's not just going to default them immediately. It did for some, because I think some is sort of because some actually was needed to actually calculate the average income. So some was also initialized throughout that process. But you'll see that if I go through this again and I do 3 to find the highest earning, now it knows that the highest sale is $5. And so when I click 5 to display this week's information, it now knows what the highest earning is. So I actually have to ask for it to be part of the total menu, so to speak. It would be nice to not have that. Maybe I'll make that in part 2. But that is essentially how we do some of this here, and awesome. Well, but actually, before I go here, I'd like to note that there are some things that we can do which we probably shouldn't be able to do, like it's like we're able to, if you see here, we're able to enter values which don't properly reflect things that we'd like. So when we update sales for each day of the week, we're actually able to enter a negative value, which we don't want to do. So I think I'm just going to put all of this in part 2 here.